between what people will say in public and what they will say in private. That's the truth. The only way we're going to get this country back is all of us, not just me, all of us, starting to speak the truth in the open again. That's what we're going to do today. This is how we win our country back. So I'm going to kick this off, and I want to hear from you. We do this first in New Hampshire for a reason. See, I'm not a politician. I come from the business world. If you asked me a year ago, well, first of all, you asked me a year ago, you're going to run for president, and I'd say you were crazy. I've built multiple successful businesses. We're raising our two sons. My wife, Corva, is a successful surgeon at Ohio State, one of the best in the world in her form of throat surgery. We were living our life happily, but if you ask me, okay, is it important that New Hampshire goes first in the primary? I said, well, what difference does it make if you do it all the same day or not? Now that I've been here, I think more than any other candidate, I can tell you I understand why you all go first. And we're going to keep it that way, because that's how we ultimately get our country back. There's no social media algorithms in the air today. There's no TV screens between us today. It is fellow citizens here having open, unfiltered discussion. That's how we re-win the United States of America. And today, we find ourselves in the middle of a kind of war in the United States of America. It's not a war between black and white. It's not even really a war between Democrats and Republicans. Not really. This is far deeper than that. It is a war for the soul of this nation. It is a war between those of us who believe that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, who believe that you get ahead in this country not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions, who believe in, yes, free speech and open debate without censorship, who believe that these ideals form the backbone of the greatest nation known to man, that even though we are an imperfect nation, we are founded on the pursuit of a more perfect union, the pursuit of liberty, equality, and justice for all. That is one side of this war. And then on the other side, you have this fringe minority who hates this country and what we stand for, who believe that your identity is based on your race, your gender, your sexuality, that if you're black, you're disadvantaged, that if you're white, you're privileged, no matter your economic background, who believe that we have to stop emitting carbon in the United States, even as we ship those same carbon emissions to places like China, who believe that maybe we can use our military to go protect somebody else's border, but we can't use it to protect our own border here at home, or else you're racist or xenophobic. And if you disagree with any of what I've just said, that automatically means you are homophobic or transphobic or racist or a climate denier. At a moment in American history where there is no greater damnation than to be called one of these things. So when everyday Americans then have to face a choice between being tarred with one of those labels and bending the knee to this new cult, everyday Americans are choosing to bend the knee, which has completely replaced our culture of free speech with this new culture of fear in the United States. That's the other side of this war. And I call this a war because there is no middle ground here. Either you believe in meritocracy or you believe in group quotas. You cannot believe in both. Either you believe in free speech or you believe in censorship. You cannot believe in both. You can't have both. Either you believe in American exceptionalism or you believe in American apologism, apologizing for who we are. You cannot have both. So that's why this is a war. And this moment in our history, I don't think we're working with a lot of time here. This is a war of urgency. If my two sons graduate from high school before we get this right, I don't think we have a country left. I really don't. That's why this election is important. That's why I am doing what I'm doing now. This country has given us everything we could have dreamed for. My parents came here with no money 40 years ago. I've gone on to found multiple multi-billion-dollar companies. I have moved by gratitude to this country, but I don't think we have a lot of time left. is in America. It's the truth. Who knows that you're in a war? You can't win a war unless you know that you're in a war. We need somebody who can't be captured by the super PAC puppet masters, the corrupting forces in American politics that have served up politicians who are really just puppets that lick the boots of their mega donors. In my case, my biggest donor is me. And we're going to keep it that way because that's what it's going to take to declare independence from the mega donor class of the GOP. But above all, I think we need now more than ever a commander-in-chief, a general who will lead us to victory in that war with fresh thoughts. A leader from a different generation to reach the next generation of Americans. I'm 38 years old. I'm the youngest person ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican. Now, I'll tell you what's going on in my generation. We are hungry for a cause. We are starved for purpose and meaning and identity. At a time in our national history when the things that used to fill that void, faith, patriotism, hard work, family, these things have disappeared. That leaves a black hole in our hearts. And when you have a black hole that runs that deep, that is when the poison fills the void. It almost doesn't matter what the poison is, folks. We obsess over it too much at times. Wokeism, transgenderism, climatism, COVIDism, globalism, depression, anxiety, fentanyl, suicide. It is not an accident that we see the rise of these same poisons at the same time. These are symptoms of a deeper void of purpose and meaning in the United States of America. That is how we solve this problem. Fill that void. Fill it with our answer to what it means to be an American today. What does it mean to be an American? It means we believe in the ideals of the American Revolution. Ideals like meritocracy and the pursuit of excellence. That you do get ahead in this country, not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions. That is why I'm ending affirmative action and race-based quotas in every area of American life. They can answer our control over the government. What does it mean to be American? It means we believe in the rule of law. And I say this as the kid of legal immigrants to this country. That means your first act of entering this country cannot break the law. That is what it means to be an American. We will use our military to seal our southern border, and yes, our northern border too. That is how we respect the rule of law. It means the people who we elect to run the government ought to be the ones who actually run the government. Not the three-letter agencies in the shadow government. They actually run the shadow government. If I can't be your president, I said this in St. Ansel earlier today, if I can't be your president for more than 8 years, which I think is a good thing, then neither should any of those federal bureaucrats reporting into me either. 8-year term limits for the bureaucracy instead of those civil service positions. That's how you actually transform. By the way, there are government agencies that should not exist. That they have become so corrupted and redundant that we don't need them anymore. We're not just going to tinker around the edges. From the FBI to the U.S. Department of Education, we will get in there and shut them down. That is how you revive the integrity of a constitutional republic. And no, these aren't just slogans. We have very specific plans of how to get this done, following the rule of law and the Constitution of this country. So I want you to challenge me on this. It's getting game time here in New Hampshire. Now's our moment. Push me on this. Push everybody on this. And I trust you all to tell the difference between a plastic super PAC puppet who comes in here and reads from whatever script their super PACs gave them and a patriot who's telling you what their actual convictions are. And I would rather speak the truth and lose this election than to win by playing some political snakes and ladders. That's how we're going to revive this country. That's what we're doing in this campaign. That's how we will save this country and our national soul. Speak the truth. Speak it with a spine. Speak it without apology, speak it with respect. But part of respect is that you respect thy neighbor enough to tell him what you actually believe. There's this thing called the Overton window. Anybody heard of that? It's this thing is an acceptable window of what you're allowed to say in public. You know what we're doing in this campaign? We're driving a semi-truck through that Overton window, opening up dialogue and actual free speech in this country. Speak the truth, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. Say in public what you will say in private at the dinner table. That's what we're doing today. Speak that truth. God is real. There are two genders. Fossil fuels are a requirement for human prosperity. Reverse racism is racism. An open border is not a border. Parents determine the education of their children. The nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind. Capitalism is the best system known to man to lift us up from poverty. There are 3 branches of government, not 4. And the U.S. Constitution is the strongest and greatest guarantor of freedom in human history. That is the truth. We fight for the truth. We stand up for the truth. That is what won us the American Revolution. That is what reunited us after the Civil War. That is what won us 2 world wars and the Cold War. That is what still gives hope to the free world. And if we can provide that dream over group identity and victimhood and grievance, then nobody in the world, not a nation, not a corporation, not a virus, not China, is going to defeat us. That is what American exceptionalism is all about. That is what we together will provide to save this great country. Thank you for coming out today. It's getting real time. I want you to be honest with you. Get around the table. Have an open conversation with one another. I don't know if we have microphones or not. It's a small enough room. We can have a microphone, or you can just stand up and ask your question. Let's get this flowing, and we can get to some topics that I know are on a lot of your minds. And so we'll start there, and then we'll just keep working our way around the room.
Good morning, Vivek. How would you have handled COVID? Basically, that's it. How would you have done it?
No shutdowns, absolute choice, and free speech at every step. I mean, medical choice absolutes in both directions. I started one of my career, I began it as a biotech company CEO. Or I was an investor that became a biotech company CEO. I developed 5 medicines that are FDA approved today. I know what that process looks like. I believe in medical choice where, even if it hasn't been approved by the FDA, you should be able to make a decision for yourself as long as they're telling you the truth about the risks and benefits. That's true medical choice. It's sad that we don't allow that in this country. And then I mean, no, just because it has been FDA approved doesn't mean they should be able to force it on top of you either. It means the choice, right to try, and also the right not to try. Both of those things have to apply. Next thing is, what do we learn about lockdowns? You try to lock something down essentially, A, it doesn't achieve your supposedly stated objective, but B, we create new problems you would have never imagined. A generation of kids now, a generation behind a lost generation, especially kids in the cities. Kids in private schools did okay. It's interesting how COVID only affects the public school teachers. It doesn't have so much of an effect on private schools. Private schools are a better form of community than any other they prevent it. And yet, they will preach about systemic racism, now claiming that math is racist. No, math is not racist. But what might be inequitable and wrong is teaching those black kids that they should be able to stay home while you have to teach everybody else how to actually do math. So it's more smoke to deflect accountability for their own failure. And then the ultimate lesson is we need free speech and open debate most. And we would do well to remember this now. We would do well to remember this now as we're looking at other crises like World War. Talk about that. If you have questions about that, especially raise your hand. I want to talk to you about that. It's during times of crisis that we need free speech and open debate the most. If we had been allowed to debate those lockdowns, we wouldn't have locked down those schools. If we had been allowed to say that the virus originated in a lab in China, we would have known that far sooner. So we need free speech and open debate, not just when times are easy, but especially when times are hard. And those are lessons we can learn today. It's not just another pandemic. Any other emergency that comes up, those are the lessons we learned. That's how we'll lead this country. Thank you for that question. Speaking of the world, we'll come back to this one right here next. Thank you.
I would like to...
We'll go here. You can start. You can start, and we'll go to the back. We'll go here, and we'll come to you, sir.
I would like to go. I have two concerns. President Trump has the strongest backbone in the big. God bless him. He was not a politician like you. The political opposition tried to machete him, and is still doing. You're not a politician. How are you going to not be in the same space that he's in?
Well, I'll say this. I give him a lot of credit for his accomplishments in his years in office. Kept us out of the wars and grew the economy. We're human beings, though. We're all human beings. And the other candidates want to do Monday morning quarterback. You can Monday morning quarterback anybody. Right? Nobody's perfect. I'm not doing that. I'll honor his legacy more than anybody else because it's the right thing to do. But I have fresh legs. I'm a leader from a different generation. I said we're in the middle of a war. We really are. This war for our national soul. I think now is our moment where we need a leader who has not yet been wounded in that war. So in some ways, one very honest answer to your question, I won't be the same person 8 years from now that I am today. I'll be a little more tired, a little more defeated. You know, maybe more gray hair, maybe a few extra pounds. But I'll tell you this. You try to drain the swamp drains you, it happened to him. He's not the same person today that he was 8 years ago. So there comes a time where you pass the torch on to somebody who has fresh legs to go with this war. That's the way I look at this. It's not about me. It's not about Trump. The American president is bigger than one man. It does not belong to Trump. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to you. The people of this country, the question is, who will take that agenda to the next level? And then I learned from some of the lessons he learned. They duped him on some of these things. The advisor, managerial class, they told him you can't fire those federal bureaucrats. What have I said? You don't know my agenda in a nutshell. Shut down the deep state, declare independence from China, keep us out of World War III in the process, that grows the economy, revive national pride. That much I can give them as your next president. The first of those, shut down the deep state, they duped him. They said, we're going to follow up after give you this example, I'll follow up and we'll go to the gentleman in the back. They said you can't fire those people because of civil service protections. Well, read the law. Turns out that those civil service protections only apply to individual employee firings. They do not apply to mass layoffs. Mass layoffs are absolutely what I'm bringing to the DC bureaucracy. 75% headcount reduction in the number of federal bureaucrats. That takes a leader who actually knows the Constitution and the laws of this country deeply. And so this is a unique combination. I want you guys to understand this because you have an important choice to make. And I'm viewing the people in this room as teammates, right? A guy like me isn't competing with which super PAC puppet can buy the most ads on TV and win this stuff. And I'm counting on you to spread this message in the community. Understand, so you primary voters are taking responsibility seriously. Here's the key point to your answer to your question. It's a unique combination. It takes an outsider, somebody who isn't captured by politics, to come in and break that system. But it has to be an outsider who also has an understanding of the law and the Constitution. That is first personal, not just listening to advisors. Because the advisors will dupe you if they come from the same swamp you're going in to drain. And then just think about that with me, actually. You know people. You all know people. So you got your academic types, the law professor types that can, read a book and, pontificate about understanding the Constitution. I love those people. Many of them are my friends. I'm wired that way, too. to an extent. But they need an executive who's actually going to come in and break these. Law professor types not going to do that. But usually the executives who come in and say, hey, I'm going to break the glass if necessary, aren't the types to actually know the law and the Constitution. It's a rare combination. And each of us should look ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves, how am I going to make my unique contribution to this country in our hour of need? I want each of you to ask that question of yourselves, because it's not just going to be a president who saves this country. But I did that last year. And I think that is a unique combination that we require now. That's why I'm in this race, and that's why I think I will go further with the America First agenda without being wounded in the same way. It is my grounding in the Constitution. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir.
Two questions, okay? We're going to soft one and a little challenge for you. The soft one is, I've heard you speak, what is a treaty like candidacy is your plan on restructuring government. I feel like the nation's debt is outside of the risk of war, number one issue that's perilous for our future. So I like
And they're linked, by the way.
Yes.
Because $7 trillion of the debt came from those wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, too. So those two risks go together, and I agree with you that the single biggest risks we face.
So if you could expand on your plan to reduce the debt, and that's kind of the solid one. The challenge to that is, while your background as a president, you've had no experience in government. So, if you were in the state of the private sector, you're a biotech executive, you probably wouldn't be hired to restructure, let's say, an automotive company. Why do you think you're qualified to restructure a massive federal government, and what skills would you bring to that challenge? And by the way, I like that you're up for the challenge.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Well, you're in New Hampshire, where the easy question is how do you solve the national debt and keep us out of World War? And I appreciate it. I love it. So I'll go quickly, because we could spend hours on each. So I think we actually do need a CEO in the White House when it comes to the national debt. Here's how we deal with it. Every budget cancerously grows and metastasizes because they use last year's budget as a baseline and they put some more ornaments on the same Christmas tree. Here's my view. Don't start with last year's budget as the baseline. Forget that. We're bringing a clean slate. Start with zero as the baseline. And then build up and ask what's actually necessary. Our budgeting process is broken. Fixing that like a CEO does. This is how CEOs, many of them, including myself, have run their companies. That's what we need in the federal government. And it has not happened once, either among states, red or blue, or in the federal government. That will take an outsider and a CEO, I think from a different generation in the White House, to actually start with zero-based budget. Now, if you look at our national debt, $33 trillion, $7 trillion of it came from Iraq and Afghanistan, just those two wars. And yet now, Dick Cheney 2.0, we're at it again. Really? In terms of what we're seeing in Ukraine, what we're seeing potentially brewing in the Middle East, it will be the next generation on whose shoulders this burden falls. And I'm a member of that next generation. It's personal to me. It's my responsibility to make sure we don't see that happen again. And your second question was about expertise. I think nobody has the expertise to be the U.S. president. I still think that's an expertise that exists. And I think that's a good thing. We have a civilian commander-in-chief for a reason. We want the citizen to be the one who's in the role of then not just being a listless vessel for the demands of the expert class and the managerial bureaucracy of government, but somebody who makes an independent judgment. Now, for me, one of the things is I've always resisted when I'm put in a box. I was a biotech company CEO, but after that, I founded a company called Strive that competes directly against BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard, against the ESG cancer in our capital markets. Totally different area. Had success doing that. The first year after launching its first fund, crossed $1 billion in assets under management. That was twice as fast as it took JP Morgan to get to the same place. I wrote 3 books in the last several years. I'm a person who takes a lot of inspiration from our founding fathers, actually. Another issue with me is as I'm young, I'm 38. Well, Thomas Jefferson is a man I look up to. He's probably my favorite president, for a lot of reasons. He wrote the Declaration of Independence at the age of 33. And he did it while he invented the swivel chair, believe it or not. And he invented a lot of other things too, actually. And so part of it lives in me. Part of what allowed me to achieve everything I have in my life is this idea that nobody tells you what you can and can't do. You make the best use of your God-given potential to have the most impact in the short time we're given on this earth. Thomas Jefferson understood that. Benjamin Franklin signed the Declaration of Independence, invented the Franklin stove, invented bifocal spectacles, invented the remedy to the common cold. Nobody said, you're not an expert in that. If you don't have a degree, you can't do that. Just sign the Declaration of Independence and mind your own business. That's the founding spirit we need to bring back in this country. And Jefferson was 33. I think it takes somebody whose best days in life are still yet ahead. I don't take it for granted, but I hope they are. I think it takes someone whose best days in life are still yet ahead to see a country whose best days are still ahead of itself. And so I think the absence of that expertise, if you're called DC, experience that. First of all, expertise is not the same as wisdom. But I think that it's going to take someone in this moment coming from the outside, as Thomas Jefferson did, to sign the Declaration of Independence of our century. And that's what I'm going to do as your next president. And if you believe with me, if you believe we're in ordinary times, that, we need to debate a couple of pieces of legislation and how you go sort of negotiate some deals with 100 different legislators and we move the tax rate 1% this direction or that, and that's how we revive this country. I think you can make a strong case that I'm not your guy. I would make a strong case that I'm not your guy. You want someone who understands that sausage making, go do that. We're not in ordinary times right now. I mean this. If we don't get this right in the next 10 to 20 years, I don't think we have a country left. We live in a 1776 moment, and I think it's time for a 1776 kind of leader. That's what I want to say.
I was at the debate this morning. Thank you for doing that. I think the one thing that Representative Connor made clear is that he does not believe that there is a problem in this world that cannot be solved by spending more money. I think, unfortunately, a large portion of that audience agrees with him, and a large portion of the electorate agrees with him. How can you win the general election for president and by convincing those people that government spending is not the answer?
Well, thank you. It is not the answer. And it's a good man. That's why I agreed to do it. He asked me, would you have this debate? He posted on Twitter. I think free speech in this country is more than just about the prevention of censorship. That's key. That's table stakes. But true free speech in this country is about culture. About people who are willing to confront those who disagree with them, but do it in a respectful manner. That's how we bring people along. That's why we go to college campuses across this country. And this relates to the answer to your question. I don't think I have convinced most of the college students we've visited that more government spending is not the answer. I don't think we have. I share the message with them. I think I make them think about it. I don't think I've persuaded them of that yet. But I think what I have persuaded them of is that at the very least we need politicians who will share their true beliefs 100% of the time. Okay? Who believe that even if you don't believe in big government spending, we're talking about how it impacts you. Said the student newspaper guy earlier today after that event. We were talking about it after this interview. It'll be your generation. How old are you, man? Yeah. 16. Well, that's a 16-year-old coming to an event like this. And then it'll be your generation that shoulders the burden of our national debt, our crippling national debt. Don't put somebody in there who's going to be long dead and gone before the problems they create are borne by you. Because then you can't hold them accountable. Right? Today, we're in a place where imagine if you're managing your own household, and many people do find themselves themselves in this position, and they know how this feels. The interest payments on your own loans, car loans, home loans, etc. Imagine if that was the chief source of how you spent your money. And many people don't have to imagine that, especially many young people. It is. So my point is, now imagine that you live in a nation where the same thing is true. And part of the reason you have to pay that interest payment as the biggest item that is a line item in our federal debt, federal budget, soon to be in a couple of years, is because we're also going to send you to go fight somebody else's war. To go defend somebody else's border when we have a border crisis right here in this country. Does that make sense to you? I don't think it makes sense to most young people, even most progressives who I've spoken to. I've spoken to more people on the left than probably any Republican presidential candidate in history during the primary. And I think that that's actually how we win this. Is our solutions. Yeah, we can debate the tactics. Do people agree with me that a 12% flat tax is the right approach? I think it is. We're in New Hampshire, probably a lot of you do too. We're never going to convince 100% of people of that. But what we can convince them of is that we have a couple of big things we need to address. It's what the gentleman in the back asked in the original question. The biggest issues we face right now are the crippling national debt, and it's part created by what we're marching our way into as World War III. This is not hard. This should be a partisan issue. And so you share that conviction with me that I think you understand that you need a leader who's going to shut down the bureaucracy that creates the spending that accumulates that national debt, and that especially if you're going to be the one who's on the front lines in a trench fighting World War III, maybe we don't need a commander-in-chief who actually leads us to it. So I think that's how we're bringing people along, not by reconvincing them of Reaganomics, though I subscribe to a lot of that myself. That's not how we're going to win this. The way we're going to win this is focus on the biggest things that matter. And to say that you don't have to agree with me 100% of the time. As long as you know that I'm sharing with you what I believe 100% of the time. That's what the best we can expect of our politicians. And I think we're going to bring them along. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Right up here.
Thank you for being here tonight. So my 12-year-old, who's a mega fan, by the way, he's here a few times. He's a student here in Wyndham, and I've had to recently have a conversation with him about health ed. Health ed is sex ed, so it's like the most awkward conversation as a 12-year-old. He said to me after a very awkward conversation, "Mom, it's supposed to be boys with this one teacher, girls with this other group. I think there's going to be girls, though, in my group, and there's girls in my bathroom. And I want to know, what will you do to help us stop this madness? And I hope that you never have to have this weird conversation with your two boys."
Well, thank you for that. I think that there's a certain mania that's spreading across this country a bit like an epidemic. It's a symptom of something deeper, which I'll get to. But superficially, I'll start with this. We live in a free country. Right? As a fully grown adult, you're allowed to wear what you want. Not going to stop you from deciding how you dress or live your life as long as you're not hurting other people as a fully grown adult. But kids aren't the same as adults. So, you don't want to be a man that dresses a woman, I'm not going to stop you. But do not foist that onto our children. Okay, do not foist onto the next generation the creation of more gender dysphoria, gender confusion that is spreading. It's a source of great suffering. If it's a source of great suffering, then why are we going out of our way to create more of it? Then you take this state, New Hampshire, and I'm not picking on you guys. It's relevant. You have a Republican legislature in both chambers, and you have a Republican governor, and they put up a bill to say that at least the parent gets to know if the child in one of those classes, one of your son's classes, the girl who shows up in the boys' classroom and identifies differently. They put up a bill saying, hey, you as the parent, what's your name? Amanda, you as a mother, get to know that, if that's what's happening with your son or your daughter at school. They couldn't even pass that. Failed in this state. I'm saddened by that. I'm ashamed of it. And I think the reason why is we have this culture of submission. By the way, think about this. They say the heightened risk of suicide if you have gender dysphoria. Wait a minute. That means if you're a parent, you don't have a right to know if your kid is exhibiting a behavior that increases their risk of suicide. This is a mental health disorder. Transgenderism especially in kids, is a mental health disorder. And it is not compassionate to affirm their confusion. That is not compassion. That is cruelty. That is cruelty. I met 2 young women here in New Hampshire when I was here on an earlier trip. 2 of them had double mastectomies, both their breasts cut off. One of them had a hysterectomy. She's never going to have a baby. They're now in their 20s. This happened when they were teens. They regret making those decisions. One of those women will never have a child, though she wants to. One of them will never breastfeed her kids, even if she does have one. It is barbaric, and I think we'll look back. A good litmus test to ask. Sometimes it's a hard thing to do, but on certain things it's pretty easy. This one is easy. Imagine you fast forward 30 years from now. Will we look back and be proud of what we did to our kids and say, yeah, that was really the direction of progress? Or will we look back and be ashamed that we let teenagers make changes to their bodies and to their identity that later in life they go back and regret? I am certain of this, but 30 years from now we will look back and be ashamed. Just as we will of this COVID lockdown, just as we will countless policies that have hurt our own children in this country. And it's a failure of leadership. Because I think most parents know this to be true. I'm a parent. I haven't met that many who disagree with me, but they're afraid. It is back to that culture of fear in our country that has spread like an epidemic. And if you want to know the best measure of our country's health, let's do a health class. Let's do a national health self-diagnosis here. America's health. You want to know the best measure of America's health? It's not the number of green pieces of paper in our bank account. That's important. But it's not the most important thing. It's not the number of ballots we cast every November. That's important. But it's not the most important thing. The best measure of our health, it is the percentage of people who feel free to say what they actually think in public. And right now, we're doing poorly. I mean, that's the hard truth of it. That's why we're here. So we're going to fix it. But I'm not going to be able to do it alone, and it's going to take all of us playing our part, but I can do my part as an executive.
So I agree with you. I do think we're at a 1776 type moment. And from the little bit of study that I've done, right after we declared independence, we still had a problem of that. Economically, we were dependent on France, we were dependent on our enemy, Britain, and Hamilton and George Washington, the Federalist Party. To have a stronger nation, they put on the first important duties, tariffs. I know that the Republican Party has for a long time really championed the cause of free trade. But right now, we're so dependent on China, in particular, if we had a war over Taiwan, and suddenly trade stopped, we would be completely destitute. We would be so poor because we have so little industry. Are you in favor of bringing back tariffs in a big way? Mind you, remember, we didn't even have an income tax before we got rid of the tariff. Would you support a tariff? And what industries, if you did support it, would you try and protect so that the American worker and American industry is strong?
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Good to see you guys this morning. Smart guy asking good questions. So let me focus on the one dimension, because we could go on a long ways with this. But the most important part of what you asked about was the one word you said, China. Okay, so there's debates to be had on economic protectionism versus not. Put that to one side. There's a clear and present risk we face with respect to our dependence on China. And a simple principle. It's not complicated. We cannot depend on an enemy for our modern way of life. We never depended on the USSR for the shoes on our feet or the phones in our pockets. Today we depend on Communist China for 95% of our over-the-counter pharmaceuticals. We depend on them for the military equipment that we use to make our F-35 jets. Think about the logic of that. Why on earth are we accumulating military equipment if we're going to be dependent on our top adversary for providing that equipment? It just doesn't make sense. We depend on Taiwan, great question, for the chips in these little phones, the semiconductors that power our entire modern way of life. And so that's the easiest question I think we can find consensus on now. This is a matter of national security. I would just say, with respect to China, tariffs aren't even enough. I think we have to make sure that we're no longer dependent on an adversary that's using capitalism as a vehicle to undermine the United States from within. What does that mean? Semiconductor independence in this country. Bring semiconductor production to the United States of America, says that even if China ever does, God forbid, attempt to invade Taiwan, our own modern way of life won't depend on it. Pharmaceutical independence, so that we don't have to, the same country, by the way, that made a man-made virus in a lab and unleashed hell on the world with the COVID-19 pandemic, the same country that's lacing illegal drugs across the Mexican southern border with fentanyl, killing thousands of Americans per month. You think that same country wouldn't do it? If push came to shove with our legal pharmaceutical supply chain, we have to declare independence on each of those measures. How do I do that? I'll tell Xi Jinping, you will not buy land in this country. You will not donate to universities in this country. We won't let U.S. companies expand into the Chinese market until and unless China plays by the same set of rules. We'll kick them out of the WTO, something we should have done a long time ago. We will hold them accountable for unleashing hell on the world with that COVID-19 pandemic, using every financial lever we have available, up to and including the national debt that they hold. Because if we don't hold them accountable for the COVID pandemic, you can expect more again. If you want the number one risk of a pandemic, it comes from China. So in some ways, I would say that I would focus the answer on China, but tariffs aren't going to accomplish that with respect to China. It needs to be decisive action that goes further with respect to actually fully declaring economic independence from China. And then, how do we do that? Can we onshore all of that to the U.S.? I would love to be a magician and make a magic wand and wave it and wish that into existence. And I think we can do a lot. But it's also going to require some reopening of relations with the Japans and the South Koreas and the Indias of the world for the parts of the supply chain that we can't bring here. At least we're not depending on our enemy to do it either. And so I don't come down on one side of the, industrial policy versus free trade, because I think it depends on the context. China. The answer is to focus on that first, because that's not just an economic threat, it's much more of a security threat to our long-run future. That's what we need to focus on and get done. Great question. Thank you so much. What I'm doing is really good.
So I watched you for a couple of years, and your evolution was fantastic. You're absolutely the best candidate. I thought it was both great.
Thank you, sir.
Now, on wars, you said you've made a lot of announcements, you make a lot of sense. Ukraine wants to fight a war. They should borrow the money. They shouldn't take it from U.S. taxpayers.
Yes. Actually, you're listening. I appreciate that. Because a lot of people aren't hearing me on this. Yeah.
It's common sense that if you want to say you made the point so well, if they want their independence, they want to have their own country, they should do what they have to do to do that.
Yes.
Give up lives, borrow money, whatever. They shouldn't be taking the money out of the pockets of the taxpayers. It's ridiculous.
To fund their kleptocracy for some mid-level bureaucrat buying a bigger house.
It's easy for them to fund the games, but they shouldn't be allowed to do that. They borrow, we contribute to it.
Totally.
The other thing, we've done a bunch of things on tax Twitter where we pull out who's responsible, who should be held accountable for these things. And you're so on the money, it's unbelievable. I mean, you're way beyond your useful years in terms of judgment.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, the second thing is, China, I think, is going to use COVID and fentanyl and all kinds of other drugs to dismantle our country. And it's a fight of all time. Unfortunately, there's people complicit within the U.S. who have aided that with gain of function, and I think some accountability by Fauci should be held up to what are you doing, why did you do that? And secondly, did he make personal money from Pfizer and Moderna and that process? And we've got a war on drugs. We'll have a war on cybersecurity. China's too clever to send people.
Well, you bring up a lot of important points in the geopolitics. As it relates to the COVID pandemic, I did talk about accountability for China. Some of that rests with government actors here at home, who purposely use taxpayer money to fund gain-of-function research abroad illegally when it was banned here in the United States. My cardinal rule is, if it is state action in disguise, then the Constitution still applies. You cannot do through the back door what you could not get done through the front door as a government actor. They're using tech companies to do it. They're using banks to do it. So what I've said is, in my first year in office, we will be crystal clear that anytime a government official has pressured a private actor to do something that the government official couldn't do directly, we will at least publish it. You gotta roll that long over, see what crawls up, then we will hold them accountable, because that's illegal today. Now, as it relates to a broader vision of foreign policy, I'll use this as a chance to address that question. I have one moral obligation. I'll start this at a personal level. I'm a father of 2 sons, we talked about that earlier. As a father, my moral obligation is to my family, period. As your next president, my sole obligation is to you, the citizens of this country, the United States of America, not some other country, just this one. That is the divide in today's GOP. I mean, most of us agree on a lot of, 80%, 90% of the domestic policy we've talked about. I think different people have different attributes. Some people bring political experience, which I don't. Some people bring fresh legs and private sector experience as a CEO, which the others don't. And those are important choices to make. But if there's a real ideological dividing line within the GOP, it's on this question of foreign engagement. And my view is firm. I have a sole obligation to the citizens of this country. And that involves hard choices. But that means you can't make a judgment of being the police of good versus evil in every other part of the world. What you realize is the closer you get to the magnifying lens, those labels start to fall apart. Just because Putin is an evil dictator doesn't mean that Ukraine is good. It's a country that's banned 11 opposition parties. It has consolidated all media into one state TV media arm. It's threatened the U.S. that it won't hold its elections this year unless we fork over even more money. The regions in eastern Russia that are occupied in the Donbass, those include regions and provinces that haven't even been represented in Ukraine's government for more than 9 years. Can't believe in democracy sometimes, but not others. And the Russian-speaking regions, where many people don't even view themselves as part of Ukraine. So against that backdrop, are we going to use $200 billion of more money and risk nuclear conflict? I don't think we should. I could if I was following some sort of somebody else's personal moral crusade. But that's not my job as your next president. So this question is, do you want the way of the past? That was Iraq. That was Afghanistan, an extended, protracted involvement. This is our moment for choosing the Republican Party. Do you want the Republican Party of the past? Or do you want the Republican Party of the future? I'm from the next generation to lead the Republican Party of the future, but more importantly, to lead this nation to our future by putting our national interests exclusively at the forefront again. And that's how I think we're going to save this nation. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I'm going to talk about
My name is Em, and I really appreciate what you said about serving where you can. And so I'm here today. I serve my town in a lot of different volunteer ways. And when you say America First, I certainly don't have that vision or not that level, but I do think a lot about New Hampshire first, because I do talk with a lot of people around our state and where we're hurting. Energy prices, we pay the highest energy prices in the country other than Hawaii. And also, I'm hearing from a lot of different industries, whether it be farmers, it could be our sugaring, maple syrup producers, our ski industries, our tourism industries. We have the fastest warming winter in the United States, and it's affecting all of those industries. And so I bring that together because really thinking about my town and what the people I know locally, regionally are concerned about. We have an opportunity, I hear you on fossil fuels built, this modern era, but we don't have fossil fuels here in New Hampshire. We do have a lot of wind offshore, and that is where we could have local, energy independence, and we could have good jobs in this state. And so I want to know whether you're going to support continued policies to develop
local energy independence and to make sure that we can be supporting industries at home. And for, the area where I live, I really want to know that that's going to be continuing to develop renewable energies. And thinking about the impact, we have saltwater intrusion in the town where I live. We're 2 towns in from the coast, and people are finding saltwater in their wells. We have massive flooding in New Hampshire. So I do want to hear how you're going to protect local industries from this concern and build up energy independence in a way that is sustainable for our communities.
Thank you for that question. So my answer is, I don't want the government picking which favorites they like and dislike, which is what they're doing today. So it's the anti-fossil fuel agenda that I'm most opposed to. I'm probably also the most pro-nuclear candidate that's existed in the last 10 years. So the punchline of the answer to your question is all of the above. Energy security is national security. I don't describe it in terms of like local energy independence. I describe it in terms of American energy independence. I think we found that there's some places that have neither wind nor fossil fuels, nor coal. But I think when we look at it at a countrywide level, it's all of the above. And that means we use all of the natural resources. That includes wind, that includes sunlight, but that also includes coal and natural gas and oil beneath our ground and nuclear energy and the atoms that constitute this universe. All are God-given gifts to make this country as strong as we possibly can be. That's also, by the way, how we fight inflation, how we grow this economy, and how we reduce our independence on foreign countries that we otherwise are dependent on for our own national security. So the answer to your question is all of the above. I'm all in for it. But right now, we're seeing an assault on fossil fuels in particular, and also an assault on nuclear energy, which is why I've been particularly vocal about those 2 pillars of reviving American energy security. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. What
are your views on the Middle East, especially Israel versus Iran? And how do you fight anti-Semitism, which is approaching 1930s Germany?
Well, I think the anti-Semitism straying across our country is saddening. I've been reflecting on what do I think is going on here. I said at the beginning, actually, right? Young people, I think all of us right now are so hungry for a cause. Anti-Semitism history would teach us, when you see it, it's a symptom of a deeper cancer in the country. It's not really just that one antipathy. Any country that has seen rampant anti-Semitism has deeper things wrong with that country. So I view it as a symptom of a structural failure that's deeper. So what you have is that, remember when I was talking about that vacuum of purpose and meaning? The black hole in our hearts, wokeism, transgenderism, climatism, COVIDism, anti-Semitism. Put it on the list. Some poison is going to fill the void. The way we deal with this is by filling that void with the real thing. If you have a hole the size of God in your heart and God does not fill it, something else will instead. If you don't pledge allegiance to that flag, you're going to pledge allegiance to a different flag instead. It's innate in us. I mean, think about even the Jewish people to bring this full circle. Book of Exodus. Escape from the Pharaoh. Wandering. Get to find the promised land. What do they then say? When they haven't yet found the promised land, we want to go back and be ruled by the Pharaoh. So that's the moment we're in. People will bend the knee to wherever siren song comes along. I don't think those people on Brooklyn Bridge or on Harvard's campus know the first thing about the conflict between Israel and Palestinians. Like, they don't know the first thing. They're hungry for purpose. We've taught them for a generation. You go to, whatever, Ben & Jerry's and order a cup of ice cream. I don't know if you know about Ben & Jerry's advocacy on this. With some anti-Semitic sprinkles on top. You feed them that to satisfy their hunger for purpose. It's no surprise. I think they spew back out. That's what's going on. So I'm a little different than other Republicans. Some people misunderstand me on this, but I mean it in a principled sense. I don't think the right answer is ever censorship. As heinous as that speech is, the right answer is to condemn it and win in the marketplace of ideas. I don't think we persuade, especially the younger people who are lost, by telling them you can't say it. And I understand the impulse, and some, even in our own party, are going in that direction. I don't. They're coming from a good place, many of them, but that's a short-term whack-a-mole that never works. It has to be by not censorship, but leadership. Fill that void of purpose and meaning with something far deeper. As it relates to broader policy, only because I've seen lots of other hands go up, I gave a 30-minute speech at the Republican Jewish Convention, RJC, what was it, Saturday, in Las Vegas. So that goes into depth on this, but my basic principle is this. Israel should have an absolute right to defend itself. And our job is to provide a diplomatic iron dome, to turn the traditional expression to a new context, to make sure that the UN and the EU or nobody else gets in their way of their own national self-defense. And I think it's actually counterproductive, both for the U.S. and for Israel, actually, for the U.S. to get involved militarily, because the idea, as long as Iran doesn't get involved, I mean, my ultimate in Iran is you stay out, we stay out. Let the IDF get its job done. And I often ask in this country, as in the 1776 moment, what would George Washington say? The theme of that speech to the RJC was, what would David Ben-Gurion, the founder of Israel, what would he say if he were alive today? I think reviving that spirit where every nation is able to act fully to defend its own national existence. Israel shouldn't be denied the right to that, just like any other nation should be denied the right to that. And I worry here separately that if that can happen to Israel, and boy, that was a bad security breach. I mean, there are going to have to be real questions and accountability for what happened. That's a separate question. If that could happen in Israel, that can happen right here in the United States, guys. I went to Eagle Pass, Texas 2 weeks ago. 2 Lebanese men had crossed our southern border the night before I got there, right at the spot that I was. I don't think those are good intentions if you're coming from Lebanon to cross the Rio Grande to enter this country. It turns out there have been 70,000 of those special interests from Islamic countries alone apprehensions in the last year, and those are just the ones we caught. So I'll worry about that right here at home. And that's something that I will prioritize as your next commander-in-chief. God forbid something happen between now and then. Starting in January 2025, we'll make sure that something doesn't. Thank you for that question. I appreciate it.
Would you support moving the capital to the center of America?
Oh, it's an interesting question. So here's the thing I would support right away. I can tell you right now. I'm not going to answer that one on the fly. There's a constitutionally ordained process for this and everything else. I support moving whatever. So I want to get rid of those government agencies and reduce the size of the federal government by 75%. But there's still 25% that remains, which is actually, people forget this, that's still a pretty big government. So people usually hit me, are you being too aggressive? I'm waiting for someone to hit me to say that that's still too big. I'm waiting for that question. I haven't gotten it yet. But it's true. A number of those remaining agencies should be moved to other parts of the country. The Department of Agriculture should be in places like Ohio or Iowa or somewhere that actually has to do with it. Same thing with respect to other remaining agencies, Department of Transportation or whatever else, even the FDA. These should not be concentrated in some sort of bubble, echo chamber that we've created. And then there's also a little trick in this thing. I like to save on the severance costs here, right? So we'll move them. We'll fire 75% of the federal employee headcount, but a lot of them will just leave voluntarily because they will refuse to move. So, you know, that's when we kill 2 birds with 1 stone while we're at it. So that much I can point to. Right out of here.
I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio.
It's my hometown, for those of you who don't know. Good to see you.
But next Tuesday, when I go back and then get back there by next Tuesday, I only have to vote on issue 1 in Ohio. Issue 1 is the right to life, abortion, kind of, and a state law, however that goes. It's a very difficult thing for me as a Catholic to try and see things equally. But this bill, if you choose the abortion side of it, it's up to the day of birth. And it is just very difficult for the whole state. So I want to know, how would you address that? That's a huge issue.
Absolutely, and I'll be voting on Tuesday in Ohio pro-life as well. So I am unambiguously pro-life. I actually picked it up in my years at St. Anne's High School in Cincinnati. That's where I was first persuaded of it, and I'm remain grateful to St. Anne's for this day for many of the beliefs that I picked up during my short time there. I think we can do better as a pro-life movement, though, in walking the walk when it comes to being pro-life. And that's how we prevent this issue from bringing us to a breaking point. How about actually saying that we value every life? Now, we can persuade the other side. Yes, about persuasion earlier. Clarence Thomas brought up a really important case of a pregnant woman who's walking on the street, she's assaulted. The unborn child dies as a result. You find me one person in this country who says that that criminal shouldn't be punished for that death. You won't find it. Just as we share those instincts in common, there's a beautiful thing about it. Now, what do we do about it? We made it about men's rights versus women's rights. This is where the pro-life movement needs to level up. I would like to lead the way in having conversations about policies relating to access to contraception and to adoption. And in certain circumstances, childcare. And greater sexual responsibility for men. Genetic paternity tests that are 100% reliable. Well, we should put teeth into that for men in this country as well. That's doable. And what I have found is that that stops us from at least moving this to a breaking point to say that we're all in this together. It's not about men's rights versus women's rights. It's about human rights. And I do think that this should be an issue that's driven by the states. Because it is a correct victory to have overturned Roe versus Wade, to say that constitutionally the federal government has no role here. Let's not make sure we make the mistake of reopening that as well. This needs to be driven by the states, not by the federal government. What I do as an ex-president is I don't think our taxpayer money should be used on all kinds of things that's being spent on today. I don't think it should be used to fund Planned Parenthood or anything else that's not constitutionally permitted to spend our money on either. That'd be my answer on that question. That's the role for the president, is to get the federal funding out of the way to fund causes that the federal government has no business supporting. And it's up to the pro-life movement to lead the way in the states, as I believe they already are. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate
it. Yes, I hate to, enter a sobering, pessimistic, sobering, realistic sobering, but I think your greatest obstacle, your greatest hurdle is the people. Why is a man so obviously intelligent and honest and, tremendous foresight and logical and basic, forthright about your positions? Why aren't you higher in the polls than you are? I know this, it's a long race, it's a long race, To me, you look at the results of the electorate, okay? You look the most saddest example is the current argument of the White House. But worse than that, okay, after 2 years of doing more damage to the country than any chief executive had ever done, in the midterm elections, they said it was going to be a red wave. It should have been a red tsunami. Instead, it was not. They held onto the Senate, and they barely took a majority in the House. How do you overcome the people? That's like Reagan said, government isn't the solution to the problem. Government is the problem. I fear presently, where we are at that point in time, the people aren't the solution to the problem. The people are the problem. How do you overcome that?
I appreciate your question. And thank you for the kind view of me. And maybe I'll close on this question, because this is an important one. That's why we're here today. So I understand the spirit of it. I would frame it a little bit differently. I think the true people of this country, actually, their own beliefs, their hearts are in the right place. It's the distortions in the system. Right? I mean, here's one reason why the polls are where they are. It's not whoever spends the most money. It's not even who spends the most money. It's whoever super PAC spends the most money. So if this entire election were held on the same day for the primary, a guy like me has no chance. Forget about it. Coming in from the outside, no chance. And by the way, I started not at 0%, but at 0.0% in March of this year. Okay? But a guy like me has a chance because New Hampshire goes first in the primaries. We're doing this differently. I mean, the super PACs are the cancer on American politics. All of the TV ads you watch, they're paid for by people who are writing 7, 8-figure checks to other political candidates, and their bet is people will behave like sheep. They won't make independent judgments. They'll just be lulled into it. The mailers that are in your, and the super PAC system doesn't love me because I have called out the far side. That's really the distortion and the cancer on American politics. The stuff, false stuff about me in your mailbox is paid for by somebody else's super PAC. I won't point him out in the room today, but there's someone here from one of those super PACs that's at this event, recording this right now, for catching some moment that will be unflattering to be able to spread that. That's American politics today. It's sick. It's broken. The person here is a good guy. It's not his fault. He's just working for part of a broken system. A machine of mega billionaires that decide that the people can't be trusted. So let's not make the same mistakes as them. Because that's what they say. In the mega billionaire class, they view the people as the problem. They say that the people are the problem. They can't be trusted to choose their leaders. So we need to get together in closed-door summits and decide who actually governs. Super PAC puppet master meetings. Literally, they summon. This is the word they use. I'm not even kidding you. It's so undignified to a candidate. I don't know this stuff. But basically, every other remaining presidential candidate did, save for Trump and myself, show up at these donor summits where they're summoned to make the case for who the super PACs are going to support. It's disgusting. So that's why we are where we are. But if there's somebody who's going to break that system, I think it's going to take somebody who is independently spending in this race. We're putting in an immense amount of our family's hard-earned money into this precisely because I don't want to be somebody else's circus monkey. As I said earlier, I'd rather lose this race than to win by playing some political snakes and ladders. But I think we're going to win this race. And I'm going to win this race because of the people who are in this room. And people like you who are in rooms like this one. To have a bottom-up, grassroots-driven answer that we, the people, still create a government that is accountable to us, not the other way around. That we, the people, sort out our differences through free speech and open debate in a constitutional republic, where every citizen's voice and vote counts equally, no matter how many green pieces of paper you control. That is the American way. We fought a revolution for that in 1776. So those guys, from Thomas Jefferson to George Washington, could have won that revolution in 1776 over the British king. Then we can do it here today, okay? Yes, our tax is hard, but it's not as hard as it was for those guys. If those guys can do it, we can do it too. That's going to take all of us. It is not some president coming from on high like a political messiah from the White House to save us. It doesn't work that way. If we are going to be saved, I'll flip the question back to you and to all of you. It is going to be because we saved ourselves. That's why I'm here today. I am here to ask you for your help. My wife, Corbin, and I, our family, we will do whatever it takes. We will stop at nothing to do our part to revive this country. I think I can reunite this country, reach the next generation as your president, make sure our best days as a country are still ahead of us. But I need you to do it. It will be because New Hampshire does it. If I win New Hampshire, I'm your next president. I truly believe that. It will send a shock to the system. I think we can succeed. I will succeed. You're all your next president. That is not up to me. That is up to you. Each of you know, and every one of you know at least 20 people. I know you do. Bring them out to that primary in January, whether you're traditional Republican, independent, or otherwise, bring them on that day. I'm going to college campuses, including in this state. Many of those people aren't polled. Too many people who come to our events tend to be the ones that aren't polled. They're a little bit outside the normal pool. That's a good thing. We will deliver a shock. And once we deliver that shock, then yes, I'll be in the position to be your next president. But for me, I was trying to tell you this, that's even the goal. That's not the start, that's not the finish line, that's just the start line. January 2025, when I take office, that's not a destination. That itself is the starting line. The destination for me is January 2033. When we leave office after 2 terms. What do I want to tell you that we actually did? Yes, I want to tell you that we shut down the shadow government, the government bureaucracy, that we downsized, that we grew the economy as a result, that we declared independence from China, that we stayed out of World War III in the process. I think we can do all these things. But above all, I want to tell you, when I leave office in January 2033, that young Americans, all Americans, that we are once again proud to be citizens of this nation. I think it's been a long time since we've been able to say that. I think it's been a long time since you've been able to look your kids in the eye and tell them in good conscience that I want you to grow up and be like him, whoever that is, in the White House. Kids know when you're lying to them. It's been a long time since wouldn't have been able to tell my kids the same thing. That is the standard I want you to hold me to. That is the standard we will hold ourselves to as a family. Half the job of U.S. President is policy, but the other half is reviving our national character, answering who we are as Americans. And once we answer that question, the rest of it becomes easier, so that we will still be the nation. I said it earlier today, I'll say it again, still the nation, where we will tell our kids in good conscience and mean it without holding our nose, that the United States of America is still that shining city on the hill, that country, where no matter who you are, or where your parents came from, or what your skin color is, that you get ahead in this country with your own hard work, your own commitment, your own dedication. And that you know what? You are free to speak your mind at every step of the way. That is the American dream. We've been running from something for a long time. Now that is what we are running to. That is how we're going to revive this country. I'm asking you for your help. Our people, if you're sign up with us, I'm asking you for donations. We'll be happy to take whatever support you're able to provide. That's not what I'm here to ask for. I'm asking for your time, actually. Keep between now and that 3rd week of January. Give us an hour, a week, to spread this message across the state, to take control back as we the people. And if you all do your part, I promise you that my family and I, we will do ours to still yet make sure that our nation's best days are still ahead. Thank you all for coming.